agenda. Thank you.
Approval of agenda.
First item up is approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Staff is requesting to remove the Shakopee Local Water Management Plan for additional staff review. So we'd like to please pull that from the agenda today.
Okay.
Madam Chair, question, do we expect to see that probably next month? Is that the
We're
idea?
hoping.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We don't need a motion to
Yep.
change that. Oh, do we?
Yep.
Okay, do we have a motion
I will,
to?
I will move to strike the Shakopee Local Water Management Plan from today's agenda.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed. And next, we will go on to the approval of meeting minutes. Give everyone a moment to review those.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Kevin, we need you.
And I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Abstain.
Motion passed for approving the meeting minutes. And now recognition of interested citizens. Are there any interested citizens here who would like to speak?
Tom Hansel, but it's old business on Clark's Lake, the drainage of Clark's Lake. I don't know if that would be under old business later on in the meeting, or, because this has been before the board years past.
It's now.
Yep, go ahead.
So I'm interested in what, if the watershed management organization here has, if their easement on that project has expired, and what conclusion they came, if any, to the result of your management plan on Clark's Lake, because it's drained. And I don't think that was the result you were looking for. But if you have any information on that.
Do we have any staff that can speak to that?
We will definitely look into that. I am new, so staff will definitely look into that and get back to you. If you prefer, we can call you or email you or
That's
set
fine.
up a meeting.
Yeah,
Absolutely happy to look into that for you.
that is an issue that you're still working on, or if there's been, I don't know how much monitoring has been done out there, or what your plan actually is, or if you have a plan.
So, again, we will definitely look into it. I want to make sure I give you the correct information and the right information.
Oh, yeah.
So,
So you're actively still on that project, technically, or as
I
a,
can't actually even say that right now because I'm not that familiar with the project at this time. But
Okay.
I will definitely be happy to look into it, and staff can meet with you or call you on the phone or email you,
Yeah, well-
whichever you prefer. Definitely.
that'll be fine for now. Okay.
Madam Chair, just to get back to the Clark Lake issue, just to review for the people who weren't on the board here before, that issue's been before us before. One of the things about that project is that the exit point, that is set by the DNR in terms of the height that it has to be. We can't control that. So that's a challenge, right? So we have to live within the DNR's restriction of what elevation they want that outlet for. The project we did was hopefully to try to improve some things out there, but not change that height. So I think if staff can go back and take a look and see where that's at and report back, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Do you remember anything about what the project was out there? I don't even.
I don't remember all the details of it, but we definitely changed and put in a different type of outlet because it was getting blocked or whatever.
Okay.
I don't remember all the details of it either, but.
Okay. Okay, are there any other citizens that have any comments or questions? Go ahead.
I was just going to introduce myself, Bruce Loney, with the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District, liaison for this board now, taking over for Charles Hawley. So, just want to, I did introduce everybody else, but I didn't see you later, Rita, so,
All right,
okay?
great, thanks for joining us today. Okay, if there's no one else, we can move on to the election of officers for 2020.
Madam Chair, I would like to nominate Rita Weaver to be the chair for the upcoming 2020 year, if you're willing.
I'm willing, but I'm a little concerned about 100% attendance because of child duties
Sure.
and other family duties, so.
I would be willing to nominate myself for vice chair to be your backup for months that, I can coordinate to see when you might be gone, if that would be acceptable, so.
Does the rest of the-
So move.
Okay. All right. Sure, I can do that.
There's a second to that nomination?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. And then should we have a motion to have?
Two for vice chair,
Okay.
right.
So I move to have Virgil be the vice chair, unless there are other.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, I think we can move on to staff reports.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Just reading some highlights from your staff report that's in your packets. We start out with the Technical Assistance and Cost Share Program, or TAX. Staff at the Soil and Water currently managing approximately 250 service request cases, and each of those are in various stages of development or nearing completion. About 1/2 of those are in either planning or being implemented as projects. Typically, we see about 30 to 35% of all the requests we see in any given year actually develop into projects. Others are addressed through providing some research and technical assistance to the individual who contacted us. Of course, those numbers are what drives the cost share component and the budget related to helping assist landowners with implementing conservation practices, either through funds provided by the WMO or through grants provided by the WMO or Soil and Water Conservation District. Marketing promotion, we focus here on cover crops and soil health. Just a few items to point out. We do have a monthly e-newsletter, so if any members of the WPC do not receive that, let me know or let Vanessa know, and we'll make sure to get you on our email distribution list so you know what's going on. There's tidbits in it about events that are forthcoming or interesting articles, both local and regional and also national, related to cover crops and soil health. We have 2 workshops coming up. One is March 19th. That's a large event that's being planned. We have some big hitter speakers and encourage anyone and everyone who wishes to attend or is interested to do so. There is an RSVP. We can get you information on that if you haven't already seen it. And then there's a smaller cover crop on March 4th. It's a smaller local event, but nonetheless it is a workshop. We're having a local farmer there by the name of Andy Lidner, who will come talk. That's occurring at St. Patrick's Tavern. The larger one, incidentally, is going to be at Creeks Bend Golf Course. Is it Creeks Bend or no? Sand Creek? Yes. Sand Creek. The last bullet under soil health and cover crop, met with Ken Thomas from Farmers Mill and Elevator, talk about our program initiative. And why that's important is it's an initiative both the WMO and the Soil and Water Conservation District have talked about for a while, and that is to begin developing partnerships with local cooperatives. Those individuals that our local farmers trust for advice on everything from seed to fertilizer and pesticide control. Often farmers are listening to those individuals more than us, and we can almost guarantee that in many cases. So we want to make sure that our efforts aren't counterproductive, that we're not offering one set of information and then co-ops coming back and offering something different, which we do see happen. So we felt we could maybe build stronger ties and help understand each other, what we're each trying to promote and complement rather than contradict each other. So this is our kind of first entry into that collaboration. Clean Water Education Program, moving down the page. I'm pleased to announce that we were awarded a grant from a new program called Lawns to Lagoons. We work with the WMO and Prior Lake Spring Lake, so it's a joint effort. And we applied for $40,000, but they wanted to distribute that grant among many different parties or who had applied for the grant, and we were happy to accept $20,000 nonetheless. Our goal with that is to implement one or more demonstration projects where we convert lawns to pollinator habitat. So we'll keep you more up to date on that as it progresses. We've also met with Cedar Lake Improvement District folks. That's, in building the relationship that Melissa Bachman with the WMO has already forged to develop that cooperation and coordination of efforts with local groups. They're specifically interested in developing an outreach and education plan for not only people who live along the lake shore, but also for other residents and land users within the watershed. So whenever we get an opportunity to partner with people who are eager and willing to do some work with our assistance, we sure capitalize on that if we can. Two more workshops worthy of note. These are two 2020 workshops at Spring Lake Town Hall. There's a rain garden workshop, that'll be April 8th, and then a shoreline workshop on June 10th. You should be hearing more about those in the near future. Skipping on to page 2. You see some graphs there. The Volunteer Rainfall Monitoring Program is an effort that the WMO supports through the Soil and Water District. We have 13 different volunteer rainfall monitors. The numbers that we have seen over the past year obviously are much higher than normal. Finally here this past January we saw some precipitation amounts at about the average level finally, and that is wet precipitation. So we take the snowfall that occurs, we melt it, and we get the rainfall equivalent for those numbers. Wetland Conservation Act, not a lot of activity of course this time of year, but I will point out something regarding the Halina Wetland Bank. That is a joint project between the county and the Soil and Water District and the Board of Water and Soil Resources. It's a 55 acre credit bank, total of 87 acres. We've got it entirely completed. And Mr. Pint, I do have the hydrology and storage numbers for you.
Thank you.
You bet. We just got them about a couple weeks ago. I went on vacation and I haven't had a chance, but now seeing your face, I'm remembering I got to get you those numbers. So the question was, well, what kind of reduction in runoff volume and peak flows are we having in a tributary to Sand Creek, which goes through, travels eastbound and goes under 21 and then through the Sand Creek Gulf.
Under 8 and then.
Under 8, yeah.
Sand Creek.
So that's all part of that ravine system. So I do have those. We are looking at, now that it's fully constructed, sometime I'm going to have to bring a photo and some aerial views of the project site for everybody to see visually, but and it's all constructed. Fairly soon we're going to get our actual first credit yield out of it, meaning we'll be getting about 4 acres of wetland bank that the county now can use for projects that might involve wetland impacts. Skipping down to tree program. So we launched our tree program order form on January 1. We've already sold over almost 7,000 trees and 32 seed mixes. And last but not least, the equipment rental graph there. So about 5 months ago, it was right before Paul left. He sat in that chair and he looks at me and says, I have a question about that program. Because this last 2019 bar was like way down here, and he was concerned whether or not our program was going to be popular or continue, or if we were going to hit our numbers. And as you can see, we actually had a record year. I'm thinking I'm going to send him this graph.
Yeah.
Just so we can let him know we were okay. Lastly, the cooperative weed management. So this is just a program I think is interesting to let you all know what's going on a bit. It's through the Soil and Water District. We don't really have WMO funding that goes to it, but it is a partnership with county and numerous townships and whatnot. But we were successful in getting a $10,000 grant. And our effort, priority effort is the wild parsnip. So that's becoming more and more prevalent in our roadside ditches, and that's some nasty stuff. So we have it all mapped. We know where the infestations are, and every chance we get to get grant funds to help curb and eradicate it, that's what we try to do. The last page of the report shows you the payments and applications that were approved at the last SWC board meeting. So this is related to the tax program. We had payments for Casey Acres for cover crops, Manny Perez for a conservation cover, which was a native prairie restoration, and Hillary Scheffler was a cover crop payment, and Travis Scheffler was also a cover crop payment. A new application was for Scott Pexa. Now, at your last board meeting, you approved increasing the cost share contract, but not to exceed 85% of the, which is the limit for the docket. So what the Soil and Water did was, because a part of that issue was related to error on our part, we wanted to take responsibility for it, so the Soil and Water paid for that difference. So the WMO share of that project did not exceed 85. But to make things right with the contractor, the landowner, and everybody else, the Soil and Water District approved funds out of their budget to cover that excess. And that's why it's listed here. It wasn't WMO funds, but it was part of that same project. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Madam Chair, just a comment for Troy. In an effort to be supportive also and be knowledgeable, I would encourage all the planning commission members to be on your distribution list for your email for updates on programs, et cetera. So if you could add that, make sure we're all on there.
We will just take care of that.
That'd be good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Troy. All right.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you. So we've had a busy, sounds like it'll be our quiet time of year, but you guys are probably aware of the fact that it isn't our quiet time of year. For those of you who are new, Melissa has actually been out on medical leave since December 24th. I'm happy to say that she is now back from medical leave, she's teleworking limited hours. Part of it has to do with her mobility, but we're very glad to have her back in whatever capacity, and then we will adjust her hours. She has more than enough planning, review, and reporting type work to complete while teleworking. So I'm very, very pleased to have her back. Staff has also been working very hard on our end-of-year financials and grant reporting. I'm very pleased to say that the SWMO currently completed all 18 of our grant reportings to Bowser on time. We did get one small extension, and we got that on time as well. Much of that was due to Ryan. Thank you very much to Ryan. Very much appreciate that. He took on that role with flying colors. So we did meet all those progress reports. Last month, I was asked to attend a legislative breakfast for McMahon. Following that, Senator Pratt and Representative Albright have introduced SF 3022 and HF 3233 to provide $600,000 in a grant for the McMahon Lake project. So again, this is a permanent outlet for McMahon, which, as we know, is landlocked, and we're currently leading the efforts to try to get that installed with substantial help and support from the residents. There will be a hearing. It could be any time. It will be staff that will be attending the hearing, as well as at least one resident. So we've obviously reached out to a couple of the residents, and one of them will be coming as well. So we'll follow up with you next month to let you know the results of that.
Do we know when that is?
We do not, unfortunately. So I've been in touch with Claire. She will give us as much time as she can. We may only have a few days notice. We'll make sure that myself and Melissa are there. And then you might want to we'll have a first and kind of second runner-up for our key residents to testify. all we know at this time, but it is a good step forward for us on that. So we're pleased with that as well. Also, the county has been approached by the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District to discuss collaboration opportunities. The county is absolutely open to participating in this opportunity. And the joint workshop with the board of the SWMO, the Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District, and the WPC will be held in April. When we have the further details and date, we will let you know on that. It'll probably be like 4:30 to 7 at night in the evening. So I'll be able to follow up with you on that when we have more details. And then the staff is also working pretty heavy on plan reviews right now. The Savage Local Water Management Plan, Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Water Management Plan and rules, Vermilion River JPO, their rules are up for review. Elko and New Market 2040 comp plan is wrapped up. We have a Miriam Junction EIS, so if you're familiar with that, it's kind of the gravel pit area in the Renaissance Festival. And then there's an AUAR in the Vermilion River WMO area. So that takes, of course, a lot of time, but we're working hard on those as well. And then finally, we were fortunate enough to hear in the last couple of weeks that we were selected for a couple of audits this year. The county, this is different than the WMO's audit, we're not sure how, but the county has been selected for a level 2 PRAP by Bowser. So we will know more about that on March 17th with the SWCD. We'll bring you those details then. We also were selected for our municipal storm sewer MS4 audit for the county. That's led primarily through Megan, but it is heavily, of course, water resources. So we'll probably give you an update on that as well. Lucky to get 2 in 1. And that is all for my updates. I am available for any questions.
Okay, we can move on to old business and project updates.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, good evening. I don't have much for updates. At the last meeting, we did kind of go through a slideshow of our completed stream bank stabilization. So didn't want to bore some of the folks that already saw it at the previous meeting. So, but that project is largely wrapped up. There's only 2 items that still remain: restoration and then plantings. So that we're hoping to do once water levels recede to a point where they can access the log jams that were constructed to complete the plantings, and then also access to do sort of the touch-up grading that they have to do at the site. So we'll be using EPA funds for those. We've got it kind of set up that 2 grants are predominantly paying for that project. Our targeted grant is ending here in a matter of weeks, and so even though construction of that will be going beyond the time frame that that grant is around, we've got prior approval from Bowser that that's okay, since we identified the other funding source that we would be using. As I mentioned, the grant is closing out, so the $2.2 million Clean Water Fund grant that we've been working with Bowser for the last 5+ years on is coming to an end. So March 11th is the last date we can charge time or other expenses towards the project, and then we have a month from that point to basically wrap up everything, enter it into their database, and then we've got a final report, which that is sort of what's going to take quite a bit of time to pull all that information together, 5 years worth of projects and all the various activities, kind of putting that and comparing it to our application and what we said we were going to do, and what the actual results were. So staff will be working on that pretty heavily here in the next month or so. And finally, In January, I attended a MICA conference. It's the Minnesota Erosion Control Association. Vanessa thought it would be a good idea just to kind of give a briefing of topics that were discussed, since not everybody would have the availability to go to such trainings. A couple of things of note. One was the Nature Conservancy was represented there and had a presentation on cover crops, which I thought was pretty well done. The biggest thing that, there are 2 points that I thought really stuck out were they're trying to make the linkage to the market, you know, where that product can actually go and make it profitable for farmers, which I think is probably a big piece of getting it to sort of take off. And the other point, and he didn't give the actual time frame of when he wants this, but their goal is 50% of all farm fields would be using cover crops. Now, I don't know the context of, you know, is that in the next 50 years or 100 years or how long, but that is their goal, which I thought was pretty good. So hopefully they have success and can achieve that. Another presentation that I thought was fairly interesting, it was related to sediment sources in the Lusua River. So obviously the Lusua River is just south of us here, both tributaries to the Minnesota River. The thing that I thought was interesting is that the study or the analysis that they did of sediment sources is similar to what we found for Sand Creek, is that it's a lot of near channel sediment sources, your ravines or in-channel sources of where the sediment to that river is coming from. And so it sort of jived with what we've done and as far as our analysis, and you know, a large portion of that sediment that's in the creek is coming from the, go figure, the nearest sources to it. So I thought that was interesting. There was also a pond clean out project for the city of Champlin. Thought it was interesting because it was a winter project, and we've gotten to be pretty well versed in winter construction. So some of the same things that they dealt with, you know, expedited timeline of getting it done, and you know, needing ground to be frozen, but needing to get it done before snow melt. So thought that was interesting too. Just a lot of the same things that we deal with on our construction projects, and they just so happen to be in winter. They were dealing with them as well, so we're not alone. And finally, we had PJ Fleck as one of the capstone speakers, and so he showed us how we can all change our vest and row the boat and Skyuma. So it was entertaining, and he had a lot of good points to try to bring into the workplace. You know, things that how he runs his football program. How that can kind of translate into the workplace, and continually trying to get better. So very motivational, and he did a nice job. With that, I'll stand for any questions on project updates.
Ryan, did they have any, on the sediment, did they have any thoughts or ideas right off that possibility to try and slow that down? I mean, they have different ideas, I guess, than we have.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Schmidt, they didn't get that far into it. They weren't into the project-based approach. It was more just the sources of where they were finding it to be, and then I'm assuming their next steps would be sort of what we did. You know, we did a feasibility study, analyzed where the sediment was coming from, and then identified projects on the ground. So they just didn't, they weren't at that point yet of actual projects.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
I would also like to add that Ryan is actually currently on jury duty, so we were very thankful to have him here today. We didn't know this morning whether or not he would be here, so.
Yes, I was off today, but did get notified I am due down the hall tomorrow morning at 8:30, so I only escaped one day of it.
All right, thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to new business, the Credit River Local Water Plan.
Yep, so this is a water management plan review that Melissa began back in June of 2019. Credit River submitted, as you know, as requirement under 8410 and 103B that water management plans for municipalities, cities, and townships be reviewed and approved by the local water management authorities, watershed districts, and WMOs prior to their board approval. So Melissa completed her initial review in within 60 days. Her first comments were that it was a good start to a plan, but was concerned that maybe some of the key elements of the plan weren't quite clear. So she did ask for clarifications on things like the CIP program implementation timeline and table, as well as a little bit more clarification as to when they might be taking on permitting authority, so adopting rules and ordinances, because of course they're also going through that transition as well. Speaking with Melissa, they were responsive and worked hard and did a good job communicating back and forth. And so she felt at this time that all of the requirements had been met, and that it is consistent with the requirements, and we should recommend approval at this time. So, are there any questions?
Madam Chair, I would make a motion to recommend for approval the watershed plan for Credit River Township as presented to us today.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passed. We don't have anything else. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll adjourn the meeting.
I think you get the award for the quickest completed meeting in the history of the.
So I like to see.
Planning Commission.
34 minutes, that's amazing.
Yeah, there we go.